So we're back. We're going to jump into another scriptless selling discovery of a high ticket sales call. I'm here with Anthony and MJ. MJ is going to be the closer, and he's going to be closing an offer that is for high ticket coaches or service providers that want to scale their offer. And then Anthony, he's going to play the prospect here. Through this time, we're going to break down the nuances of the discovery part of a sales call, which accounts for 90% of what a closer is in control of as far as the outcome of a sales call closing or not. We're also going to look at the nuances from scriptless selling. So not just using scripted words, canned lines, memorized analogies, but how to actually have a real conversation, an authentic conversation where you're truly connecting with the prospect because you're figuring out what you need to do in real time. Now, you might be wondering, how the heck do you do that? Watch and learn. We're going to dive into this right now. So, MJ, kick us off with your opening question.
Awesome. So Anthony, I looked over your application and really got all those details. So I'm curious, in your opinion, what's the biggest challenge you're having in the business right now?
Um, I would say consistent growth. I find that the business at the moment is quite volatile. It's fairly unpredictable, and I just want to really find a way that I can level that out and one, get the peace of mind, but obviously get
Mm.
the consistent cash flow as well. I think that would be really nice. So that's kind of the main thing I'm focusing on at the moment.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is there's volatility in the business so that there's no predictability, and so as a result, you're not having peace of mind because the cash flow is inconsistent. Is that accurate?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So talk to me a little bit about this month since it's the end of January. Um, where'd you guys finish up?
So this month wasn't too bad. I would say we touched just over the 30K mark.
Pause, pause, guys. When you say vague terms like finish up, where did you finish up? You start infecting the mind of the prospect that they can be conversing with you in vague terms. So Anthony's going to start giving you some rambled response about his numbers because you said, where did you finish up? So he's going to talk about the whole backstory about how he finished up at this point. Just say, okay, so whatever you want to focus on, I would probably say cash flow because that's his words.
Yep.
I'd say, so as far as the end of the last 30 days, what was your positive cash flow? And now he's just going to have to give a very precise and specific number. And one of the things that a lot of salespeople say they struggle with is prospects that don't give them the information they need, or prospects that give them too much information that they don't need. And the result is the call goes too long, or the result is the call is going all over the place because you're trying to rein the prospect in. Yes, you can get difficult prospects, but in general, most salespeople are getting those types of prospects because that's the way they're leading the discovery. Does that make sense?
100%.
Yeah. And then one other thing, just to nitpick a little bit, I loved your summary. Okay. So, you want to improve the cash flow because that's leading to a lack of peace of mind, blah, blah, blah. Just little things. So you said it's not predictable. It's very subtle, but remember that we're selling someone the pain of their current situation. So it's not predictable is starting to talk about like the hypothetical future. Oh, it's not predictable. I would say, so right now it is unpredictable because now they're focusing on right now in my current situation, I am feeling, I'm experiencing unpredictability, as opposed to it's not predictable because it's just less painful for the prospect. Oh, it's not predictable. No, it's not predictable. Rather than, so right now it is unpredictable. He's like, oh yeah, shit, it is unpredictable. It's very subtle, but the sentiment that the prospect feels is completely different when you focus on what is rather than what is not happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So just very subtle. All right, jump.
So in terms of where cash flow is at currently, what was it in the last 30 days now that January has consolidated fully?
Yeah, so January was actually a pretty good month for us. We cracked about 200,000 for the month in January.
Okay. And I know you mentioned that things have been not predictable currently. What was cash flow in the month of December?
Yeah, so big shift. December was like 56,000 for the month.
56,000.
Yeah, it was pretty big difference.
So you guys 4x'd from December to January.
Yeah, well, January is usually like our busiest month of the year. New Year's resolutions, a lot of people, coming in strong. Um, and that's the thing, right? With organic traffic, it's
Mhm.
just like it's so up and down. Like you can literally have months where I know the algorithm's just not favoring you for whatever reason, whatever it may be. That's what I mean. Like the swings are pretty crazy.
Yeah. That is a pretty big swing in terms of where that was at in, let's say, November, just so I have a good sense of the last 3 months. Where was it at in November in terms of cash flow?
Yeah, November wasn't too bad. It was like around 110, 120K.
110. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I know you mentioned that this is like causing a lack of peace of mind. Um, when you say that, like, what do you mean specifically as it relates to these fluctuations in cash flow month to month?
Well,
So hang on, great question, perfect timing. This is where, in hindsight, I would be going back through this call review, writing out the questions that you've asked, and then not only are we looking at the questions that we shouldn't have bothered asking or filling in questions that we should have asked, but to really master sales, the other thing that you want to be looking at is this was a good question, but did I ask it in the best way possible? And as you repetitively practice the way that you're phrasing questions, you become a master of sales. So I don't remember how you worded it, but it was quite elongated. I would have
Mhm.
just said, so you mentioned the lack of, so I would have said, so you mentioned that the unpredictability and volatility in your cash flow means you don't have peace of mind. In what way do you not have peace of mind? And so whenever you're summarizing information, summarize first and then keep the question concise. So you mentioned blank, 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 pause. In what way? Because when you shift from I'm talking about information to I'm asking you a question, when you ask the question, it needs to be as narrow as possible so that the prospect is just hearing the question and responding to the question rather than trying to hang on, what was he asking? What was all the information that he was connecting to that? So summarize info first and then ask the question. So you mentioned blank, blank, blank. In what way do you not have peace of mind? And because my question is so direct, it makes the prospect wake up and think, oh, fuck, I need to really think about this. Does that make sense? Now, you wouldn't improve this in real time as we're doing it now, but this would be one of the things that I would have coached you on if we were looking at the call review and we were looking at the transcript. We say, okay, that was a good question, but the way you phrased it, you want to practice those different questions so that 12 months from now, every time you land a question, it's super direct. Make sense?
Yep.
Awesome.
So, Anton, you mentioned inconsistent cash flow. And obviously, it's clear here, and just volatility in how that's leading to a lack of peace of mind. So, I'm curious, like, in what way, though, is it causing a lack of peace of mind?
I would say more it's just like, okay, I want to scale this business. I want to grow it, right? And I understand that in order to do that, I need to be able to reinvest in the business, right? Whether it's like bringing on more staff, you know, putting more into advertising, whatever it may be. But like just with these swings, I'll have one good month where, I'll have a solid chunk of change left over. And then next month, I don't know what to expect. So I'm kind of scared to put that money into the business. And, like it might only happen 1 or 2 months out of the year, but, going from like 200K to, one of our bad months, which would be like anywhere from like 30 to 50K, then there's even times where I have to make sure I have a really good like bit of financial cushioning because I might even be at a shortfall. Like in some of those bad months. So I think it's just like this stress that's building as time goes on because I can't scale this business as fast as I want to.
Okay. Was there a time where you reinvested back into the business and you had one of those 30, 50K months?
Yeah. Yeah, there actually was. There was
What was that like?
yeah, it sucked, to be honest. It was like April last year. Um, Basically yeah, I had some money on the side. I forked out like a really big chunk. I wanted to redo my VSL. I wanted to get a whole bunch of, new content for like the website and for socials. So,
Mhm.
I went pretty hard with getting some content creators on board, some really high level like filmmakers and editors, and hired out a few things as well for the videos. So I, put a lot of money into it, thinking it would do really well, it would crush, and yeah, like I said, I don't know, the algorithm just didn't take a liking to it. April was a really bad month afterwards, and more or less like almost just literally dumped all of my profit from March, and didn't really see any return. And then I was like really reaching into my pocket. So that
Yeah.
sucked.
Aside from the month sucking, how did that really show up and impact the overall business, and how did that show up for you?
Yeah, I mean it was tough in all honesty because it didn't just affect me, like it affected my team at the business as well, especially my guys who are like incentivized by performance.
Mhm.
I've got two closers on the team, and you know if we have a bad month, they definitely feel it. They also feel it if we have a good month. I'd love to give them more of those, but yeah, that's it's tough because you know I can sense that there's a bit of tension, and it all falls back on my shoulders at the end of the
Mhm.
day. So it was just like I felt like I had my own stress, and then like kind of the stress that I was sensing from my team all on top of me, and it I didn't really sleep too well that month, put it that way.
Okay. So it not only affected you in terms of stress, and you mentioned not being able to sleep that well that month, but it affected your team's overall income and performance as well, is what I'm hearing.
I mean, it affected their income definitely, but I got to say I'm pretty grateful for those guys. Like they stuck it through. I wouldn't really say it impacted their performance, but I could tell that it was like it was one of those things where yeah, towards the back end of April they were just starting to like it's not like they weren't performing, but I could see that their vibe, their mood, it was down. Um, you know,
Mm.
I like to do nice things for my crew as well. So, you know, whether that's like a company outing, or if I can, some of the guys who work remote, if I can just send them vouchers or something, just, I like to do that little stuff just to push them, and not, me not feeling like I want to do those gestures because the company's running thin. Like I don't really like to
Right.
be inconsistent with that stuff either. So it's just kind of more like glum, for for the month.
So, a key skill in sales is knowing when to zoom out and
You're
when
right.
to zoom in. And I want you to think of it like if you go to Google Maps and you want to zoom in on something, before you zoom in on something, you would zoom out on the map so that you can make sure that where you point the cursor before you use the little scroll wheel and zoom in is the right spot. And you don't know that until you've zoomed out and got the broad picture. And so we zoomed in on that example of like, was there a time you invested and then you had a bad month? And lo and behold, that had happened and it wasn't a great experience. But is it the thing that we need to zoom all the way into the details of as an example? No, because it's not the most painful thing for this guy right now as to why he might need to make a change now. It's just a story. Oh, there was a time in the past. Okay, well, it's kind of like if you're on a dating offer and you're asking a guy about his current dating life, and he says, oh, my current dating life has been very volatile. Why has it been volatile? Oh, I keep going on dates with the wrong women. Okay, was there a woman in the past that you went on a date with that was the wrong woman? Yes. Oh, when was that? Oh, I don't know, like a year ago. And then now we zoom in on like that experience. It's like when he's talking, he's going to be annoyed and it's not going to be nice, but it's so disconnected to the right here, right now, that even though it looks like the prospect is having a shit time telling the story, it's not actually going to make the sale. And so what we need to do in this call, I drew a little diagram for it. It's a terrible little drawing, but if you can see on my piece of paper, I've got an arrow, a line, sorry, left to right, and above the line, it says volatility. That left to right is the timeline of this guy's business. In other words, from when he started to where we're at now. And he's been mentioning that he's been having these swings, unpredictability, volatility. We need to get the broad picture of that volatility and those swings. And why that's important is he said it's preventing him from growing and scaling the business. So we need to know from a very zoomed out perspective, has there been any growth or any scaling? And if so, what? How much growth? How much scaling? And at a very broad level, what does the growth or the scaling look like? And so then once we can see, oh, the business was growing for the first 6 months, then it stopped growing. And then now it's actually been going down or it's been staying the same or whatever. We now have this visual graph in our mind of this is the actual timeline of the business relative to growth and relative to scaling. Now we know when it's been going down or been staying the same, that's because cash flow is unpredictable. But we just need to look at the pain of this guy's situation, which is I'm running a business and it's not growing and it's not scaling. Right now, I'm still not clear on what that is. I know that he had a 200K month, a 56K and a 110, but relative to what? Relative to a 2-year business, relative to a 6-month business, what's it look like at the broad level? Then when we decide to zoom in, what we're going to zoom in on is, okay, so it's been, stagnant or going down or whatever for the last 6 months because of the unpredictability and the volatility, and also because of, as a result of that, you've been scared to make investments. So what I'm curious about is, given that that's been going on for 6 months, was there something that changed now that you're looking for help? And then we're going to zoom in on the now moment. Oh, 2 weeks ago, blank happened. 2 months ago, 1 month ago, blank happened. When we zoom right into the example, it needs to be an example that's going to pivot and leverage the guy to take action now, not a historical story that, whilst it might be annoying that he had that month 6 months ago, if it was so bad, that experience that he had 6 months ago, or however many months Anthony said, he would have already fixed it. So that isn't the story. It can't be the story, because otherwise we wouldn't be on this call now in the future. It would have already been resolved. Does that make sense? So we have to zoom in on the story that's what was the moment that now this needs to be fixed? We don't know where those coordinates are until we zoom out and we go, okay, this is the graph. It looked like this. Oh shit, there's a weird thing going on over here. What was going on there? Because we've got the broad picture, we can now see where we need to put the cursor on the Google Maps to zoom in and find the treasure. Does that make sense?
So much so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are you thinking or feeling?
I feel like I was going to develop part of that after that initial. Okay, so that happened in April of last year, and you've been experiencing these ebbs and flows since then. What have you been doing to stabilize, and what have you been doing to grow and scale from there? And so that was going to be, but again, like it's not the thing that I need to be asking.
You hit the nail on the head, Josh. Like me telling that story about April. Although it was like, as you could see, you could see frustration. It's like a false telegraph that if you're not adept to it as a closer, you're gonna
Yeah, you're
think,
like, oh,
oh,
he's annoyed. He's telling me something
yeah, I got
frustrating.
it.
It's like,
But
Yeah.
like you said, it had like it's completely separate to do with the now.
It's not
yeah,
relevant.
it's a guy that's not going on dates right now telling you about his bad ex-marriage 3 years ago. It's like, if your ex-marriage was so bad that you're now still dateless, then that wasn't the turning point. Otherwise, you would have gone and got dating coaching, as an example. So
Yeah.
that can't be the moment. So let's jump back in, but go backwards a little bit. So let's rewind. I want you to get more 30,000 foot view data. And I want you to focus on the fact that Anthony said the business has not been growing or scaling. So we need to draw a graph, draw a map. I would basically literally draw it if I was making notes of what that lack of growth or scaling has looked like over the business timeline. And then when you do that, you should be like, oh, that's where something changed. Let's zoom in on that. And then we'll go from where it changed, as in it stopped growing or stopped scaling, or maybe it never did. And we'll then look at the details from that point forward so we know we're focusing on where the current problem is. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Do that.
So Anthony, I know you'd mentioned that the volatility and the inconsistency in growth has really prevented you from actually scaling the business. I'm curious to know, like, how long have you been in business for? How long have you been doing this?
4 years now. This will be the start of year number 5.
Okay. And in terms of the last 4 years, and obviously going into year 5, when you say it's been inconsistent with the growth and not being able to scale, where exactly? All right, I'm getting a little stuck here.
All
On
Sure.
what
good.
the
All
question
good.
asked
Do you
there.
want me to
Yeah.
give you an example?
Yes, please.
All right. Watch this. Super simple, dude. Okay. So you've been in business 4 years, coming on 5. So we're talking about the business not growing, business not scaling. End of year 1, profit.
You cut out on me there. You said end of year 1, and then I didn't hear anything.
What was your profit? End of first year in business.
End of first year. So honestly, the first year I was running this business, I had to still work my 9 to 5 while I was getting it off the ground. Uh, when you say profit, you mean profit total for the year, for year 1?
Correct. Correct.
I think like 40, 50K.
All right, I'm good to jump back in. I gotcha. So 40, 50K after year 1. Where were you after year 2?
So year 2, it started to pick up a bit. And that was actually the year that I was able to really leave at the end of year 2. I was able to step away from my 9 to 5. I would say the business, like in terms of gross revenue for year 2, it did in the ballpark of about 300K.
300K. Okay.
Yeah.
So 300K, you stepped out of your 9 to 5, went all in. How about year 3?
Hang on. He changed the terminology. Got to be careful. Prospects do this. $40,000-$50,000 profit. Year 2, blank revenue. He's
Revenue.
changing the
Yeah.
variables. You
Okay.
got to be careful.
Yep. Got it. So year 2, 300K in revenue. What was your net profit? What'd you take home that year?
I think for myself personally, it was like 90,000 before tax.
Again, you flip the terms again. Revenue, profit, take home personal income. They're different. They're all different. And what I would have done, but you wanted to jump in, is I was going to ask a follow-up question to my 40, 50K. Okay, so you made 40, 50K profit. How much did you pay yourself on the end of year 1 of business? Just answer that, Anthony.
I didn't pay myself anything because I was still
Okay,
working
0.
my job.
Got
Yeah.
it. Okay, and then year 2, you said 300,000 revenue. How much profit did you take from the business?
Did I take home or did the business make us
Did the
profit?
business take? Yeah, business profit.
So business profit, I think it was in the realm of like doing probably like 50% margin. So like maybe 150.
Okay, so year 1, 40 to 50, year 2, 150. And what did you pay yourself?
In year 2, I paid myself, it was about 90 grand. And then I left like 60K in the business account from that profit.
Yeah. So 150 minus 90, 60K left. Okay.
Yeah.
So from year 1 to year 2, you 3x'd the business. So you had some growth and you had some scale then, but a part of that potentially is because you'd gone from part-time to full-time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. What about year 3? And then you carry on from there, MJ. So you see what I'm doing? And as I'm
Yep.
doing this, we're now having a conversation about not growing and not scaling. But I actually am now proving the pain that, okay, so, and what's going to be weird to see what Anthony does here is like, so he 3x'd when he went from part-time to full-time. What happened the next year when he was full-time to another year of full-time? Did it grow or did it stay the same? Now we've got a timeline of like, okay, so, and it might stay the same for the next year after that. So it might be, and you don't have to play this prospect, Anthony, do whatever you want. But it might be, okay, so for the last 3 years, since you've been full-time in the business, you haven't grown or scaled at all year on year on year. Is that correct? Yes. You see the pain. So you've been running a business for 3 years and it hasn't improved. Right? And so then I've got my zoom in. Okay, so you haven't grown or scaled for 3 years, and we'll get into the reasons. You said swings and volatility and unpredictability with cash flow. We'll get into details of that. But did something change that now after 3 years of, with all due respect, wasting your time, in other words, putting in time and effort and not moving forward, that we're now on this call? And he's going to have to tell me, it's like the prospect's going to tell me where to zoom in. He's going to tell me where that pain is, as opposed to us asking for a random example. Does that make sense? It's kind of like, weird analogy, guys, but if you've ever been fishing, if you want to go fishing and you want to catch fish, one of the things that you'll do is you'll look out over the water and you'll look for where there's ripples in the water, where you can see the water moving, which means there's fish underneath. And you then get your rod and you cast it where the ripples are. You wouldn't just put the bait on your line and just throw it in some random direction and be like, well, I hope there's fish under there. And that's kind of what we're doing when we just say, give us an example. And he's like, oh, I'll tell you an example, as opposed to, oh, the data has told me the ripples are over there. I'm going to cast my question there. And then you are going to tell me what the example was, because I just cast the question in the right direction. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Do you feel like you would ask what have you been doing question prior to what's changed now that
you could, because if you don't, and you don't come across really calibrated, or you've missed a bit of the data in the front, it can come across like you're assuming they've not been trying, which could rub the prospects up the wrong way. I personally don't, because it's like, I don't really care too much what you've been trying, because it didn't work.
Yeah.
It's like, why are we on this call now? And I might go backwards after that and say, so he tells me, oh, there's some situation right now, that's why we're talking today. I say, okay, got it. What do you feel you need now? Oh, I think I need this, blank, blank, blank. Got it. Was there anything similar to that you tried in the past? I might divert that way so I can handle the objections of like, oh, I've tried that before, or that didn't work, or whatever. But I'm handling it from we're moving forward in the conversation now. I know what the pain is. I know what the problem is. Now let's try and fix it. Okay, regarding solutions, I need to know what you've tried before. But regarding the pain or the problem, I don't need to know what you've tried before. The front part of a sales call is defining the pain and defining the problem. No pain, no problem. Solutions don't matter, man. Doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. You need to get the prospect to a point where they're like, my life sucks, my business sucks, I need to do something about it right now. And off the back of that emotion, now we can start talking about fixing the problem, right? It's like, sounds bad for guys, but it's like, the first thing you do before you go on a date with a girl is like, physically, am I attracted to her? If I'm not attracted to her, it doesn't matter like how nice a person she is. It's like, it doesn't matter how great the solution is to the business problem if the guy is not looking at his life going, I'm in pain, I'm in problem, I'm in the shit, I need to fix things. That's the first thing. You have to get that first. And it will become clear to you and the prospect. You're like, we both know that you're in a shit show. We now can discuss consultation as far as solving the problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Go from there.
Okay. So from year 2 to year 3, now that you're full time, you 3x the business. Where'd you end up at the end of year 3 now that you've been full time and had a 150K year the previous?
Yeah. So
Sorry to jump in so quick, guys. One thing, now we're leaning towards the pain. We can amplify that question. It's a little bit leading, but I would have said something like, okay, so that was year 2. 365 days later of you working full time in the business, what was the results? Because now we're kind of making him realize you spent 365 days full time and you didn't fucking grow. But we're emphasizing the time and the effort and a year later. But I wouldn't just say 1 year later, because that's like, oh, well, that's time. It's like it was a year later. No. A year of you working full time in the business, putting your time and effort and your dedication and your focus into that, where did you end up? And then now he's like, oh, shit, well, didn't really change, or it didn't change at all. You see how I'm just packing in the pain. Yeah.
Yep.
Just little nuances.
Okay. So you wrap up year 2 and now you're full time in the business. And so help me understand. So 365 days later, where did you finish up year 3 full time?
yes. So that was probably where I started scratching my head because I thought year 2 I had cracked the code with the growth that I'd seen. And then I think year 3 literally was like 350 instead of 300. It was like 50 grand more than year 2.
And that was revenue. How much of that was actually net profit for the business?
Um, Margins more or less stayed the same. It was like 55% margins. So yeah, you can pretty much just chop it down the middle.
Okay. So like 25K additional revenue went into your pocket.
Into the business account, yeah. I still tried to keep what I like paid myself under that like 100K mark.
So did you pay yourself 90K again, or did you pay yourself more?
I did 100 flat that time,
100
and
flat.
then I think it was like 180 in profit, so I just left the 80 in the business account.
Okay. So you just paid yourself 10K more from working an entire year full time in the business.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was like enough.
That's it. That's exactly what you want to do, but we need to stack the data on the front end of it. You're nailing it now. Can you see how by zooming
Yeah.
out,
Yeah.
the pain is just so obvious, whereas you zoomed in too quick. You got to zoom out first. Okay. So do you want me to jump in and show you how I would stack the pain on that question? Because what you're asking is spot on. You're basically saying, so a year later, working full time, you earned $10,000 more, right? Which is true, but it's not as painful as this. I'm going to add like 2 or 3 questions in. Okay, so a couple of quick questions. Before you went full time in the business, what was your salary?
It was like 80 grand a year.
Okay, so your salary before was 80K, and was that full time or part time that you were working a job?
No, that was full time.
Okay, so that was full time. So 80K full time. You then went into the business. First year was kind of part time. You know, you made 50 grand revenue, but didn't pay yourself. Second year, 300K revenue, paid yourself 90. So you'd paid yourself $10,000 more from going full time in business than your salary before you got into business. And then when you were now full time in the business, you know, people say, oh, I'm full time in business. How many hours were you actually working a week full time in business over the last year from year 2 to year 3? How many hours was that?
I mean,
Weekly average.
we like honestly probably like 90 hours on average, 80, 90 hours.
Okay, so 90 hours a week times 52 weeks. So 4,680 hours later, you had gone, that was 4,680 hours later from the first year full time. Let's actually times that by 2 years because that's since you left your job. So, okay, so 9,360 hours later and 2 years of your life from quitting your job, you were now paying yourself $20,000 extra. So 9,360 hours of time and effort, 2 years of your life, and your salary has now gone from $80,000 a year to $100,000 a year. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. What about year 4? And then I would move on. But look at how I'm just stacking him. He's just like, fuck. I took that many hours. I worked 2 years. I went from 80,000 to 100,000. I might even add another question. Quick question. Aside from the fact that it was 2 years of your life and, you know, $20,000 extra a year, which if we break that down, $20,000 divided by 2 years, divided by 12 months. So you basically paid yourself from quitting a job to going into business 2 years later. You were now paying yourself $830 extra a month. That was the increase that you've given yourself from going into business full time.
Mm.
Yeah. So like at the end of your monthly salary when you were full time in a job, the difference now that you've spent 2 years building a business is you're paying yourself $800 more a month. That's what's changed in your life.
Would you tack on at the end there, like, and you're working double the hours?
I'm going to get to that as well.
Okay.
Yeah. One step at a time. Okay. So $800 extra a month. Does that sound about average, like about accurate? Like when you look at your expenses and your income, is that basically what you're noticing? Hey, I'm running a business, but I'm basically making $800 more a month.
Yeah, well, like I didn't want to take all the money out of the business. I probably could have paid myself a bit more, but
Yeah, if you'd have made more money in the business, if you hadn't had so much volatility and unpredictability, you could have paid yourself a lot more. Yeah, that's why we're on the call. Anyway, so $800. Now, another question is, you said you're working 90 hours. When you said you were full time before, how many hours were you working full time?
I would probably average it like 45 hours a week. Some weeks
Okay,
are a
so
bit
half.
heavier.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, got it. So you've worked double the amount of hours for $20,000 more, which I'm not going to calculate it for you. You can in your own time if you want. But are we on the same page that your hourly rate has significantly gone down? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
And then one other question before we move on is, when you were working 45 hours in a job, how did that compare as far as like responsibility and stress and having to manage things compared to running a business for 90 hours? Like, did you feel that 45 hours working for someone else was just easier, relatively speaking, as far as responsibility?
Yeah. Of
Okay.
course.
So,
Yeah.
so what I'm wondering is, why not just go back to a job?
Well, I mean, I know that, like if I smash it out of the park in business, I can earn so much more than what I could ever earn working a job. So like I want to push through and I want to see that. And I think the thing that's motivated me is like, although it's not money I've been able to take home, just seeing like even $350,000 transacted in a year, it's like it's motivating me to know that it's like possible.
I understand your point, and I don't want to, put a dampener on that. And I love what you're saying as far as you want to smash this out so that you have a much higher earning potential. But, and again, I'm not saying this to criticize you. I'm just saying it so that we've got a sense of reality here. It's kind of like the guy going to a strip club and saying, "Oh, I'm looking at all the hot girls." So yeah, but dude, they're not going home with you. Like, you're making 300 grand revenue, but you're paying yourself half, just above half of what you were earning. So what I'm curious about is, have you gotten to the point where you feel that you need help to actually take home more money from running a business.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, cool. Okay, got it. Right. So you see how I'm layering things: pain, problem, ownership. I need help. And we're having this conversation, which is like, I'm the leader. Like I'm guiding you through what to do and why you need to do it. Yeah. I don't know where MJ's gone. Are you there, MJ? Well, for you as a prospect, Anthony, oh, he's back. Can't see you. Your camera's gone.
Sorry, what were you going to say, Josh?
I was going to say, for you as a prospect, how does that feel for you when I'm grilling you?
Dude, like it's a role play and I'm sitting here squirming. So it's crazy. Like I definitely had a lot of, even that's why I threw that curveball. Well, didn't really end up being a curveball, but tried to throw that thing of like, oh, but I could have paid myself more if I wanted to. I left 80 grand in the account for the business. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough because like you say, you're holding their feet to the fire so strongly that it's like you want to kick, you want to back out, you want to make excuses for yourself, but at the same time, this is where the data becomes so powerful. Is like if you were leading me, I could 100% just kick out and just say, piss off, mate, whatever. But because you've just used my revenue that I've told you, I'm trapped. What can I do?
Exactly. That's why there's no point trying to challenge a prospect, trying to reframe them, trying to do any of that nonsense with fancy word tracks if you haven't gathered the data. Because no matter how linguistically accurate your word track is, if the prospect hasn't given you the data, they just feel like you're trying to manipulate them. And you don't need to. You just get the data and you lay it all out and you're like, well, this is what it is. Like, are you okay with that? And they're like, fuck no. Okay, cool. And the final bit that I hope MJ caught it was like, it then brought me to the question of like, well, why don't you just go back to a job? And then he has to sell himself. He's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm never going to earn as much money if I do that. I have to smash this out. He's selling himself on, I need to get this business fixed. I can't object. I can't say I'll pray on it or I'll ask my wife or I'll think about it because he's just sold himself on the denial of the other option. I'm not willing to go back to a job. That would be stupid. My earning potential is going to be a lot less. I have to smash this out. So I'm getting the prospect to sell me on why they need to act and why they need to act now because of the data that we gathered at the front part of the call. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's so interesting to see how you're unpacking things because as you start doing it, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense why he's asking that. That makes sense why he's asking that. And it's just like, holy shit, all of it is so logical. And then, but you can't do that with a script, right? Ever. And so it's interesting seeing it from like that perspective because I'm like, this is where you want to take the call, but like the fact that you're doing it the way you're doing it, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense why he's asking.
It's interesting you say that, MJ, because I started listening to UM's call reviews, and I've also, listened to your calls, Josh, and listened to UM's discoveries in Scriptless Selling Part 1. And it's so funny because whenever the prospect in the role play says something and my mind goes to a place of a question to ask, and then I hear or I hear you ask a completely different question than where my mind went, I'm like, oof, like there's made so much more sense. It was so much more on the money. It was so much more in the direction of moving the call forward. And I'm like, okay. And then where my mind went intuitively for a question, this is like the calibration and the gap that I'm need to work on closing.
Exactly. It's like if any of you have ever been in a small airplane or know anybody that flies, inside an airplane, you have a wheel in a small airplane that's called the trim wheel. And the reason why you have that is because if a plane is flying straight, unless the wind is perfectly towards you or perfectly behind you, which is not going to be, it's going to be what's called a crosswind. If you're holding the controls straight, the plane is going to fly off to the side because the wind is pushing it. So you use a wheel that's called a trim wheel. That means whilst I'm holding the controls straight forward, even with the wind pushing me sideways, the plane is going to go forward. And so that trim is what you need to practice with your questions is, if I ask this question, the call's going to kind of veer off this way. Whereas if I calibrate my questions, the call goes directly forward. Like you said, straight on the money, straight through the pain, like straight through the time that it takes to run a discovery, straight. And the problem is, even though a script is perceived as being straight because the questions are one by one, your conversation may not have gone that way. It's like the script may be like holding the controls of the plane dead straight, but it's a certain type of prospect in a certain type of situation, which represents the crosswind, which means you're following your script. You're holding the steering wheel dead straight, but the plane's going off in this direction. You're like, what the fuck's going on? I'm asking my next question. So yeah, because you haven't trimmed the airplane or trimmed your conversation to compensate for the fact that every person is different. Every conversation is different. You have to have that ability to trim the call, to change things with like, okay, with this situation, I'm going to ask this, and this, and that's going to get me on the money. That's going to get me to my destination. So yeah, very, very well observed.
The easiest way that I could explain is like when you see a rookie, like, when you first step into it, it's like if someone brings in a car and there's a problem with it, I'm like checking the tire pressure, I'm checking the dipstick for the oil, I'm like testing if the AC works, I'm like looking under the seats, I'm doing all this shit. And then someone like you steps in and you just turn one bolt or you just change out one part and that solves a problem. It's like you're just teetering with all this stuff at the start of the discovery, where it's like, what, you're bouncing over here and then over there and then over there, and not really creating a gap around anything or getting to the meat of anything. And honing that in is just, that's the craft.
There's a video I saw on Facebook a while back of this guy. He's like a 70, 80-year-old man that lives on a farm, and he's famous for being able to restart the engine of like any vehicle, like old tractors from 100 years ago and fucking boats that haven't worked for years. And people would bring their vehicle from all across the country, and he'd like kick it, press a button, listen to the engine and be like, oh, it's this. And you'd be like, what? Like, how did you know it was that just from listening to it or touching one thing? And it's just calibration, man. It's just experience. That he's not following a checklist. He's not like, oh, like you said, check the dipstick, check the wheels, check this. He just looks at it, listens to it, kind of goes, oh, well, I'll tinker with this and this. Oh, it's this. And then like 30 minutes later, he's got this engine starting, running that hasn't run for like 100 years. And you're like, what? It's crazy. So yeah, it's 100% that. All right.
To
MJ.
that point, Josh, real quick.
Go ahead.
And I when you ask your opening question and you get that answer, are you all of a sudden like going into, okay, here's all the experiences that come with this type of answer and response? And so are you just pulling from that reservoir?
No, that's where my analogy doesn't really work. It's that I take what the prospect said and my brain automatically is creating a map of, okay, so the first thing that Anthony said, which was also where you went off a little bit in the wrong direction. He did say cash flow and he did say peace of mind and he said things like that. But what was the real problem was his business is not growing or scaling. So as soon as he says growing or scaling, my mind is like, well, when did the business start? Where is it at now as far as timeline? How has it grown or scaled during that time? Like my brain just instantly was like, I need to visually be able to see that. And I'm like, if that's what I need to see as a consultant, as a detective, as a doctor to find the problem, I bet that if Anthony gets to see the visual in his mind of what I'm looking at, he's also going to be able to guide me to the problem. If we can both see what we're looking at, it's like, oh, okay, so it was going up. And then in year 2, it stopped. What happened then? And we're both able to see what to talk about. And that's the thing where salespeople misunderstand is they're like, oh, I need to be showing the prospect something like some genius thing. It's like, no, the prospect doesn't need to be shown something special. It's just very simply, they've never actually laid it out on a piece of paper. Like
I literally wrote that down.
Yeah, like they just haven't got a piece of paper and gone, timeline, growth and scale. Oh, I had this problem there. Well, what happened then? Oh, well, I went full time. Okay, well, if I went full time and it still didn't grow, it only went up by 20 grand, what's the issue? Well, the issue is I probably had a belief that if I go full time in business, put more time in, it will just scale. That belief has been voided because I put 10 times more time in and it didn't scale. So that probably tells me now that the issue isn't time. The issue is I don't know what to do with the time. In other words, I don't have a plan. I don't have expertise. So the prospect could have probably figured all that on their own. They just don't do it. But as closers, we're like, oh, I need to show them some genius thing. It's like, no, you just need to lay out very crystal clear what they probably haven't laid out in their own mind, and then just ask them questions about it. And they'll be able to solve their own problem. But closers like, well, if they can solve their own problem, why are they going to give me money? It's like, I don't really know the answer to that. It's just like, it's almost like a attachment to, oh, this person helped me figure out my problem. I should probably just stay working with them and give them some money, even though I could probably now figure it out on my own. So it's more that you're giving people clarity than giving people some genius answer that they couldn't have worked out on their own. They just don't work it out on their own. Yeah.
I would also say most closers don't give them clarity. They just give them another option to consider.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, oh, you're doing this, you need to do that. It's like, well, now you've just led the prospect and they're just going to reject it and try and give you objections because you're trying to tell them what to do. Yeah. All right. Jump in wherever you want. We're going to go for another 10 minutes and then I'll do my summary. So whatever you want to practice, whether it's going back through some of the things that I've already now shown you, or if you want to carry on from here and close out the call, you make that decision and we'll go from there.
So, Anthony, just a couple of quick questions for you. Like, before you were working full time, before you worked full time in the business, what was your salary at the time?
So I was making about it was 80 grand.
Thinking about 80K. And how many hours of a week were you working at that time?
40 to 50, so you could probably just call it 45 on average.
40 to about 50 hours. Okay. And so after going full time for an entire year, um, if I'm not mistaken, did you say that you only put away you made about 10, 20 more, $20,000 more? Is that correct?
In the first year, it would have been 10. Yeah, I paid myself 90.
90K. And then year 3, you paid yourself, I think you said another 10K on top of that, just under 100.
Yeah.
Okay. And how many hours were you allocating towards the business now that you were full time?
Cool. Be like 80, 90 hours a week.
So almost double from what you were doing previously with your salaried position.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. And so, yeah, so your hourly take home actually had gone down since you went full time on your business.
Yeah.
Pretty significantly. Okay. So I guess my question for you is like, we're like understanding that, like, why not just go back to a salaried position?
It's just not an option. Like I know that in business I'll be able to make so much more money than I'll ever have the potential to earn in a full-time job doing what I was doing. So I like I just know that exists out there. I've also like made that leap, which was the hardest part, like quitting my job. And so I just like it would just be like horrible to have to go back. It'd be like humiliating, honestly. So I need to make this work.
Can I ask why do you feel like you need to make this work?
Well, I mean, like I've already put so many more hours into it. You know, I've already gone through so much more stress for it. So I kind of want the payoff for all of that.
Mm.
And then also, although it is more work and more hours, and sure, it can be more stressful. My overall fulfillment is so much higher building my own business, my own thing, in an area that I'm passionate about, yeah, don't get me wrong, like it definitely gets to you, but like I'm still a lot happier than I was when I was working my full-time job.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. And so my question here for you is like, was there something that happened or occurred? Like what's changed for you in the business where 2.5, 3 years later, you're now looking at potential solutions to stabilize things so they're not as volatile or up and down as they have been month to month?
Yeah. So yeah, last year, like the back end of last year was kind of average. I'm not gonna say it was anything crazy. Like it was very volatile, but overall, like it didn't do anything crazy. And then January of this year, we've had a really good month. We had a couple pieces of content go viral, which brought in a really good amount of capital. And I just kind of saw it like my window of opportunity. Like it's like I've got this money here now, and I'm at the start of a new year. As
Well,
they
time out.
say,
Can I pause you real quick? Because I know you mentioned that you had a big March and then again going into April, you felt like it was time for you to ramp things up, and then you had a really bad April right off the back of March. Like, what's different now where that's not going to happen in February?
um, I think the difference is that I'm looking at different tactics. So, like I'm gonna try and invest in something different than what I invested in March, and hopefully that has a different outcome, a better outcome.
What was it that you invested in March, and what were some of the things that you tried, if any, since having the initial experience, and obviously since you've had the volatility over the last 9 months?
So in March, as I said, I invested in like content creation, like filmers, editors, like just a big production for like a new VSL and for social content,
Hmm.
for website content. So, I still think that's like an asset because that's sitting on the website now, so it's there. But in terms of like now, I mean, yeah, I haven't really tried anything since then. It was more or less the same throughout the year. We just tried to keep doing what we were doing better, which is like organic growth, right? And so now, yeah, I've spoken to a few people. I've like been researching, and a lot of people have been telling me that, paid ads, paid traffic, maybe like creating some other offers within the business at different price points. But I think mostly the paid stuff, they were saying that's a lot more predictable, and that could help straighten things out. So that's that's kind of what I'm exploring now, which is obviously like super different than just paying a bunch of guys with cameras to film some cool shit.
Sure. So when you say you've been exploring and looking at different options for the last 9 months, um, what's prevented you or stopped you from just going with one and actually executing and taking action on that?
I would say I didn't have like the cash injection that I just got from January, which is what I would say is giving me the confidence to feel like I can have a bit of buffer to take action again, more than anything. Yeah.
Sure. And I understand you're on the call with us because of some of the marketing that you saw. What's why haven't you just contacted some of the people that you had previous conversations with and gone with any of those?
Oh, they weren't like businesses or coaches. They were just like friends of mine that run businesses and that, like are in the business world. So it wasn't like I was chatting with any other companies. I was just putting the feelers out to my friends, right? Like you catch up, you're like, hey, how's business going? What's going on? So I was just telling them where I was at, what I was struggling with. And they were like, you should check out this, you should check out that. And then honestly, like that conversation just kind of came and went over the course of a few months towards the back end of last year. And then I caught you guys' ad and had a really good January, and it all kind of just teed up.
What about the ad really kind of resonated with your situation where you were like, yeah, this is the route that I should take based off all the feedback that I've collected over the last few months?
I would say it was like, you know, the the fact that you guys had done this before with other clients, that gave me a lot of confidence, because I think that if you can crack the code on like a repeatable system, in business, then that's always better than just trial and error, right? So maybe just, I like to try and be a student and believe that other people know something that I don't. So there was that, and then seeing that you guys work with paid ads as well and could like, that was something that came up in the conversation. So that came into it too. So I would say between like the case studies, seeing that you guys operate in paid ads and just seeing that you target people who do high ticket coaching, like what I do, um, it felt like, from what I had seen, at least on the outside, it felt like a fit. So I just,
Mhm.
you know, figured I'd
Yeah.
take some action.
Gotcha. The one thing that I'm curious about, because you mentioned earlier that since that experience, you've had some fear on taking action and investing in the business because you never know when you're going to have that lull again. And so, has something changed where that fear is no longer kind of holding you back?
So great. You absolutely want to address that. I would just phrase it slightly different. I would just say, so what are you going to do now?
Mm,
You want to be even more detached, because the way you phrased it was a little bit leading, a little bit like,
yep.
oh, I'm kind of hoping that you're going to say something's changed. The more detached you are when you're asking the prospects to make their own choices, the more they dig in on their own choices, because it was their own choice. Yeah. So everything you just did up until there, which is why I didn't stop you, I was just making notes. Perfect. The only thing that we could have added earlier on in the call, which I think is a key piece, was once we'd got all that 30,000 foot view, zoomed out information about you went full time, you put in all the hours, but it didn't pay off. The only thing I would have wanted to get the prospect to respond to is, why do you think that is? And I want to take the conversation down to a line of the
Commitment.
prospect basically admitting, well, I kind of thought if I just put more time into the business, I'll figure it out. Okay. And how do you feel now? Well, now I've realized that time is not the answer. I need guidance. I need help. I need mentorship. I need a plan. That's the only thing that I think we just missed a little bit of, because now the prospect has basically reframed their own mindset of like, I need help. I don't just need time. And then we could have added that on to where you went just now, which is, okay, so you feel you need help. Why do you feel we're the people to help you? Because of blank, blank, blank. And then that would have connected into that bit. And at this point, aside from that one question and that little area of conversation, you're at the point now where you can close it. You just summarize everything. Okay, so you've been running a business for 4 years. You quit your job. Um, the main reason you quit your job is because you want to be able to earn so much more, which you'll never be able to do if you hadn't quit your job, and you also know you'll never be able to do if you go back to a job. But you've been trying to build a business for 4 years, and you found that it just isn't growing or scaling. You thought it might be time going part-time to full-time. That wasn't the answer. You've now realized it's blank, whatever he would have told me to. Why do you think it is? You need mentorship, you need coaching, you need a plan. And you feel like we're the people to help you for this, and this reason. And so my question to you is, how much longer are you willing to not be able to reach that higher earning potential because you don't know what to do with all of this full time that you have now that you've been running a business for so many years? How much longer are you willing to forfeit hitting that higher earning potential? And he would have said, not another day. I'd say, okay, cool. And then we close it and just move into the transition. Okay, awesome. So I'm definitely clear on everything. If you want, I can take you through A through to Z, how we give you the right guidance of what to do with all of that full time so that you can grow and you can scale, you can have predictability, no volatility, cash flow, peace of mind, all of those things. I'll lay that all out for you step by step, A through to Z. Sound good? Yes. And then you pitch him, and then you close it. Clear?
Well, yeah.
Excellent. All right. Good stuff, brother. That was very good. A lot of that was very, very good. Was that useful seeing some of those additions to add in there?
Yeah, I mean, just getting used to scriptless selling, and it's a transition that takes some time. And I'm just
100%.
yeah, it's super nice to hear it from your perspective because it's connecting the dots for me for sure.
Nice. And Anthony, how did you feel when we added into what MJ was doing, some of those additional things?
Yeah, it was awesome. The way that you were twisting the knife with the data, I think that was probably the biggest breakthrough for me because I wanted to kick back so bad. I wanted to put a shield up, and because we stacked the data at the front end from zooming out, there was just no way that I could do that. And so that was a very big takeaway for me.
Awesome. All right, guys, I'm going to summarize everything and wrap us up. So there you have it. Another scriptless selling discovery in action. We covered a number of different things. Now, before I summarize everything, as I've said in previous videos, and as MJ just said there as well, whilst watching these YouTube role plays is better than nothing. You are not going to master internal mastery and you're not going to master scriptless selling just from watching some YouTube videos. We train on this 4 or 5 hours every single week. On top of that, we have all the training on internal mastery, all the training on getting into scriptless selling, moving away from scripts and moving into scriptless. Combine that with live training, role plays, access to me, access to my underground mentor. That is what it really takes if you want to make more money in selling, if you want to enjoy selling, because every single conversation is different. And if you want to use selling as a vehicle to become the best version of yourself by actually learning to have authentic conversations, by actually learning how to master human behavior. So if those are things that you actually want to do, there'll be a link somewhere below this video to join the Unicorn Closer Mastermind, where we go deep on all of this stuff, not just a quick 1 hour video on YouTube. Now, summarizing what we've covered, a few of the key things we covered is the internal mastery. That is because if you're holding someone's feet to the fire, they are going to have a part of them that wants to resist. And if you haven't done the inner work, if you haven't done the internal mastery, when they resist, they're going to win. They are going to push back so hard on you that you won't be able to hold the frame. But if you don't hold the frame, or you don't hold someone's feet to the fire, the likelihood of them giving you $10,000 or whatever your high ticket offer price point is basically zero. Because someone is going to give you that money when, number one, they've had their feet held to the fire that there is a problem. But number two, they feel like you're the person that can lead them through that problem. You need to have the internal mastery to be able to do that. That's why we go so deep on that inside the mastermind and why it's the foundation of everything. Nothing you learn about scripts or scriptless selling is going to have a massive impact if you, as a closer, are not capable of holding the frame when you're challenging a prospect. Number two, we talked about zooming in and zooming out. Front part of a sales call, you've got to gather the data, the relevant data, but also the big picture of the data. If you do that, you don't have to follow up. You don't have to do objection handling. You don't have to be hard closing people. The data does the selling for you. The data is crystal clear to the prospect. They can't argue it. They can't fight it. Like Anthony just said, you're able to twist the knife in with the data. But when they want to push back, when they want to argue with you, Anthony's exact words were, there's no way. They can't fight the facts. But if you're just following script, you're only going to have a couple of questions and you're already done with your situation part of your call. The facts might need 5 different questions, 10 different questions, 15 different questions, depending on how complicated the situation is that you're solving. You have to be able to sell without a script. So you have all of those questions available because they're not pre-planned. It's whatever question I need to ask to get the data, I'm going to ask it. And the more you use a script and you rely on a script, the more you lose the ability to ever be able to create your own questions in real time. So however many days, weeks, months, or years longer you want to cuck yourself from ever being able to create those questions in your mind, that is your choice. If you say, you know what, I actually want to be able to close anybody that's closable, then you have to ditch the script. Next one is how scripts just simply won't allow you to grab what you need. And that's because we talked about how different prospects in different situations need a very different focus in the conversation. And if your script makes you feel like you're going in a straight line, but actually this type of prospect or this type of situation needs you to go off in this direction, the script is going to prevent you from being able to do that. So in summary, with the internal mastery and the scriptless selling combined, that is what you're going to need if you want to master closing. If you want to close at the very, very highest level where you can close anybody on any offer at any time without having to do follow-up, without having to do objection handling, and without getting bored as fuck following a script, then you need to choose to ditch the script. If that's something that you want to do, as I mentioned before, there'll be a link somewhere below this video. Click the link right now, watch the video, and if that resonates with you, if you align with the values that we have inside the mastermind, which is the highest standard of excellence so that you can live the life of your dreams and do that by developing internal mastery and learning how to have a scriptless discovery, then click the link and join the Unicorn Closer Mastermind right now, and I'll see you on the inside.